For today's video, I didn't film myself. I filmed my graphics cards. I'm swapping graphics cards again. Welcome back to BLG, I'm Ben London, and today we are diving into Doom: The Dark Ages. The Doom franchise needs very little introduction, as it has been defining the FPS first-person shooter genre for over 31 years. Back in 1994, I was supposedly playing Colonization, an educational strategy game and rather harmless in comparison. But one day my mum confronted me and asked me, Benjamin, jetzt muss ich dich doch einmal fragen. Are you killing these Native American Indians? Because all she could hear out of my room was this. Weißt du noch, Mama? And finally, after a 5-year wait since Doom Eternal, we have the follow-up Doom: The Dark Ages. Right off the bat, Doom: The Dark Ages is one of the best optimized games I've ever come across. There's almost no technical issues, it runs smooth as butter, even on older generation GPUs. Yeah, there are some issues with the 50 series again, namely that the 5080 is trailing behind the 9070 XT in benchmarks. In Chapter 5, the dragon flying level, I had especially a few freezes when recording with shadow play and having multi-frame generation turned on. Now, I'm going to put the game through its paces at 1440p Ultrawide, not with just one or two, but 3 GPUs. The RTX 3080 10GB launch version from 2020, the RTX 5070 Ti, and the RTX 5080. We'll cover native resolution performance, upscaling quality and frame generation, latency, and how both cards handle raw power and overclocking. All tests I will be doing in a dense and demanding early sequence from Chapter 6, Siege Part 1. And did you just see how quickly that was loading? There isn't even a shader compilation, nothing. Bethesda normally has the longest loading times. For the 3080 benchmark, I used the following settings: 1440p Ultrawide, and I've set the refresh rate to my monitor's maximum overdrive setting of 180Hz. I won't use VSync or frame rate limiting in this game, as that can have a quite significant impact on performance and especially latency. We always start with TAA, native resolution, reflex mode is on. Overall quality slider. It's quite odd that in this game, it's very hard to notice any differences between any of these presets. The biggest jump would be from low to high, but above that there's almost no difference quality and performance wise. It is believed that the Ultra, Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare settings are reserved for the upcoming path tracing update. And in any case, all of them require hardware ray tracing. Here a very important setting, texture pool size. For a 10GB VRAM card, it should be left at the exactly 2048 standard setting. If you have 8GB VRAM or less, you should lower it to the lowest setting. For the quality setting on the 3080, I start with medium. So here we go, first run with TAA, native resolution, and no additional manual overclocking in MSI Afterburner. I wanted to get this video out already for last week Friday, but I wanted to overhaul, first of all, my performance overlay that you can see here now always in the top left corner, but also the way I benchmark FPS and also system latency. I've had to really get my head around this, and I use now CapFrameX to measure the average FPS over a 1-minute run for each of the settings. And then I use FrameView to measure average PC latency. Before I was just eyeballing numbers, but now I have the exact latency information. You can see this here in the top right corner, and for this run we are at 46 milliseconds of average PC latency. This is what my benchmark result looks like in CapFrameX, 51.2 average FPS, and the latency you can always see here on the left. Now I've added a bit of a manual overclock to the 3080 10GB in MSI Afterburner. I can't push this card too much, only plus 500 on the MEM and plus 160 on the core. I did have problems running into instability with anything above that. Even though in 3D Mark stress tests, Port Royal and Steel Nomad, I could go like to 220, 230 plus on the core. But this game doesn't seem to be quite happy with the stress test results from 3D Mark, so I have to go quite a bit lower, maybe because it is a hardware ray tracing game. On this ASUS 3080 TUF OC, I can get about a 5% performance uplift with my manual overclock. Not much, but I take it. The next run now is with DLSS quality and still medium quality settings. The average FPS now jumps up into the mid-70s and latency drops down below 40. Up next we switch DLSS from quality to balanced, and normally, at least with newer GPUs, balanced would be the setting to go for when we play in 1440p or 1440p ultrawide, because balanced is nowadays with DLSS 4 transformer model what quality was with DLSS 3. Dropping down to balanced gives us roughly about a 10% performance increase here. I'll skip forward a bit and just quickly add also high and low with DLSS balanced, and we can see, between each of the settings it's about 10% difference. Except from Ultra Nightmare to high, it's only 2.6%. Personal preference here would be DLSS balanced high. If you want more FPS, you can always drop down from balanced to performance or from high to medium or even low. Going down from high to low would be an increase of 20% in average FPS. Also notice latency is always in the mid to high 30s of milliseconds. If you want even lower than that, like 25 or lower, I think you're going to have to start considering playing in 1080p. But in conclusion of this test, the 3080 is perfectly capable of actually running Doom the Dark Ages, a modern next-gen hardware ray tracing game. And bear in mind that this scene is actually one of the more graphically demanding ones. If you're inside in a spaceship corridor or other interiors, the average FPS is much higher than that even. Moving on to the 5070 Ti, and here I increase my texture pool size setting to the maximum. We shouldn't max out VRAM usage entirely, as we need a little bit of headroom when we turn on frame generation or multi-frame generation later on. But even with the maximum texture pool size setting of 4096 here, I can see that the allocated 13 Gigabyte or so isn't even maxed out, with plenty of headroom, so I just leave it to max. And everything is set to Ultra Nightmare. Starting off with native TAA again, at stock we have already crossed the 60 FPS mark and the core clock sits around 2840-ish megahertz. 64.4 average FPS, latency is already in the high 30s. I've been running these overclocking settings with the 5070 Ti for over 2 months, here they are. MEM plus 2000, core plus 430 and power limits to the max of 110%. FPS seems to now occasionally cross the 70 mark, and the core clock is a staggering 3260-ish megahertz. And lo and behold, we got a whopping 10% performance uplift just by applying this manual overclock, which I've proven to be stable. This is why I keep saying you cannot review or benchmark these 50 series cards without factoring in those massive overclock headrooms. Maybe I was lucky to win the silicon lottery with this card, but you will see later that my 5080 doesn't behave much differently. With DLSS quality, we now get a staggering 31.2% uplift. Amazing. But then going from quality down to balanced, and it's only 4.6% increase? I'm starting to get a bit suspicious. Here's an example of my run with DLSS balanced and low graphic settings. What do you think? If I hadn't mentioned it, you probably wouldn't have noticed it, right? It's still ray tracing. Same with performance numbers. It's just a 10% difference between Ultra Nightmare and low? Let me know in the comments what you think is going on here. I'm massively CPU bottlenecked with my 5900X, Nvidia driver issues, or the 50 series is a shit show. Speaking of shit show, we're coming now to my favorite part of this video. Frame generation, multi-frame generation. Behold 4090 performance. Without just me telling you, I'm showing you what the average PC latency is here with 2x multi-frame generation. 37 milliseconds. Obviously the FPS hasn't doubled. Can we just appreciate that the average latency has gone up from 33 to 37 only? Here's now multi-frame generation 3x. And latency 39 milliseconds. Almost the same? Let's watch a bit of a clip with multi-frame generation 4x. On the 5070 Ti, you can max out your 240Hz monitor like that. Although, has anyone got a 240Hz ultra-wide monitor? I know this clip is only 60 FPS, but does this look crap or fake frames, unplayable? What do you think? Is there any unwanted ghosting, artifact, or any other bullshit that we don't want? I must say, this is a huge surprise to me. Here are the results. Going from 2x to multi-frame generation 3x leads to a 36.3% performance increase, and the latency is only going up from 37 to 39 milliseconds. MFG 4x gives us a whopping 157% performance uplift over baseline. But oh no, the latency has suddenly gone above 40 milliseconds. So unplayable now, isn't it? So what's going on here? MFG really stands for Magic from God. The Tech 8 engine's ultra-optimized low-latency Vulkan pipeline and precise motion data make it ideal for multi-frame generation? Or AMD just sucks? I'll keep things short with the 5080. Doing a quick overclock on the 5080 goes similar as with the 5070 Ti. First, I max out the power limit to 125% on this card, memory plus 2000, and on the core I can go here safely to plus 350. By now you've probably seen me play this scene more than enough, so I'll just go through the charts real quick. But we can quickly take a look at my overclocking results. It's around 3200 MHz core clock. Temperatures are around 64 degrees. And the fan speeds are higher than on the 5070 Ti. They're here around 50%. On the 5070 Ti it was around 30. So unfortunately the Gigabyte card is a bit louder than the MSI Gaming Trio. The price difference was effectively 45 euros. So it's a no-brainer to stick to the 5080. And I shall return my beloved 5070 Ti this week. On the 5080, the overclock gives me an 8.2% performance uplift, and latency sits in the mid-30s. With DLSS balanced and Ultra Nightmare, we gain 22.4%. Adding DLSS balanced, low, high Ultra Nightmare to the mix shows how little of a performance difference is between all these profiles. In fact, it's only 10% between DLSS quality Ultra Nightmare and balanced low. Here I've removed all the unnecessary DLSS balanced benchmarks and added all the frame generation, multi-frame generation ones to the mix. We can see here the expected but not massive performance gaps. MFG 4x increases the average frame rate by 174% versus baseline DLSS quality Ultra Nightmare, and the average PC latency sits now in the mid-30s. Let's briefly compare all three GPUs, and here we see something very strange. With DLSS balanced low, we can only see a performance difference of 22.7% between the 3080 and the 5080. And the gap between the 5070 Ti and the 5080 is tiny. Going from the low to the high preset, the gap between the 30 and the 50 series now widens more significantly. The 5080 is now a lead of 41.1% over the 3080, but the gap between the 5070 Ti and the 5080 is still minor. As expected, Ultra Nightmare result is pretty much the same. Comparing just the 5070 Ti and the 5080 here once more at TAA, stock and overclocked, the difference are around 18 to 20% between the two. But as soon as I turn DLSS quality on, the 5080's lead over the 5070 Ti is again only 10%. With frame generation 2x, the lead of the 5080 is now again 16%, roughly the same with multi-frame generation 3x and 4x. All of this now bears the question, is the 5080 really worth it in my system for Doom the Dark Ages? Is it possible that the 3080 would still be the most fitting GPU to go with my 5900X? Here I show you that in synthetic benchmarks the 5080 has sometimes a massive lead over the 5070 Ti, but in a real gaming scenario I can sometimes be quite CPU bottlenecked. What do I personally think about the game? It's okay. I mean, it has this weird parrying stuff going on, where you always need to parry the green projectiles. Boom. Dong. I quite like the sound effect, although it is proper silly to do these constant QuickTime events. It's something to get used to. I think it's grown on me over time. And where is it, the green one? Boom. This is so stupid. Definitely a bit controversial what they've gone for here, but I'm also only in chapter 6 out of 22, I think. so I can't really pass judgment on this game until I really finished it. The biggest issue is that every new game competes with a backlog. I don't think I'm even halfway through Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, but I'd rather play that than Doom the Dark Ages. Assassin's Creed Shadows, also not the greatest game. I'm about 90% through the main quest. Will I ever finish Black Myth Wukong? Here I'm in chapter 3 out of 6. Claire Obscure Expedition 33 haven't even started, but it's meant to be amazing. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 also not started. Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl, oh man, I feel I started that half a year ago. Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remaster, I think I have to skip that one. And Warhammer Space Marine 2 also never finished. Let me know in the comments what your backlog is like. With that said, please excuse me while I try to finish at least one of those games. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of this, and I see you in the next video.